Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Hear Our Voices. So, let me get some housekeeping in the way. You can follow us on, sorry for my voice, guys, too. It's been a struggle these past couple of weeks. You've been hearing me. It's gotten better, but. So, you can follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and all the information will be down below for for you to get in contact with us. I'm not the only person who monitors those social medias. So I'm on there constantly, but I'm not the only person looking at the information. Our last person we interviewed, Lorda, she also helps me. And we have a person coming up. I'm not gonna tell you her name yet, but she also helps me with those adventures. So if you want to get personally to me, you can contact me on my personal page. But if you want to get us to anybody who's lived experience and need information, you could definitely go on our main page and ask a question there. And anybody who gets it will be happy to answer any questions you might have about anything that's coming up. Go on our Twitter account. We are live on that all the time. I try to do more Instagram things. We're trying. We give out work, like people who have job fairs, things like that is on Twitter, different back to school events. So if you follow us on Twitter, you'll get the most updated information that we have at the moment. We have a resource packet that is out already, so it should be linked at the bottom in the description. If you have need any resources like food, furniture for your house, clothes, things like that, that resource packet would be great for you. So sit back and relax and hopefully enjoy the podcast. So today our guest's name is Juan, and he's not a person with lived experience, but he's a person who worked with people with lived experience, and he also works with helping getting the homeless areas kind of more out there. We're helping us improve the system. So Juan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you have done for the homeless sector in New York City?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the invitation, Khadisha. I'm really happy to be part of um, um, supporting and raising the voices of, you know, uh, those who struggle with homelessness and, in an effort to create better opportunities for housing stability for families. Absolutely. So, um, I, for about 3 years, um, I worked as a supervisor at Brownsville Home Base, and Home Base is an human resource administration funded program that is dedicated to provide assistance for families experiencing housing stability or those who have exited shelter. The main goal of Home Base is to prevent shelter reentry. The Homebase provides prevention services, right, such as rental arrears assistance, city FEPS and FEPS vouchers renewals. Also, oftentimes when families will need transfers, Homebase was also there. It's there to help families with the paperwork and advocacy with HRA. Also, HRA provides landlord and tenant advocacy. Oftentimes there's conflict, there's misinformation. So that's where Homebase case managers and supervisors are there to support. Homebase is also there to provide aftercare services. Aftercare services are basically services that are designed for families who have either exited DHS shelters or have received a voucher in the community. Aftercare services basically means that um, families are provided services, referrals, right, and advocacy to stay in the community, to create links in the community, to for the children to be able to stay in the community and to succeed on the community. Of course, this home-based offices are provided in different areas in the city where ho homelessness and I would say this, yes, poverty is it's concentrated. And I had my experience at home base. was very unique. It was life-changing and basically guided my advocacy work. Um, because of my work at Homebase and what I witnessed and what I saw in policy and what good policy is and what policies need to be incremented or improved, I moved into the policy field. About 2 months ago, I started working as a policy associate for housing and income security at Citizens Committee for Children of New York. And honestly, having this experience in social service and homelessness guides my work. And I feel very grateful and fortunate to have been worked at Homebase and see the work that is done and how it can be improved.
That sounds wonderful. So, if in case people haven't listened to our previous messages or podcasts before, how can you go about finding a podcast? How can you go about finding a home base that's close to you that a person can come in and get help to buy?
Oh, yeah, great question. So the way Homebase works is that families who are the number one eligibility is for families and individuals that are at risk of, all you need is a housing crisis, right?
Right.
From that point on, you can either call 311 or just Google Homebase, and right away you'll find the page, Homebase HRA, and the way it works is that you have to go to the Homebase location that is close to your area. So it goes with zip codes. For instance, in Brownsville, if you resided in the 11212 zip code, you would have to go to Brownsville Homebase, right? There are several Homebase offices in Brooklyn, several offices in the Bronx. I believe there are 2 in Manhattan, and I believe there are 3 in Queens. So it's very easy. Google a Homebase, and then you will go to a page and it's sponsored by HRA, and you just go for Homebase location or Homebase locator, and then you'll see your zip code in there, and then there are phone numbers. My understanding is that you need to call first. Every Homebase works differently, but you will have to call first to get an appointment and then be assessed for eligibility. Obviously, there are income thresholds, to assist families, and from that point on, my understanding, at least where I worked, you had to be assessed for eligibility, and then you will be assigned an appointment, and then you'll be assigned a case manager.
Yes. Like you said also before, it's not only for families, even though our podcast is focused on families, anybody can get these services. So I don't want people to feel like when they listen to this podcast, yes, we focus on families because most time people don't realize how much homeless families are in New York City because most of us are tucked away. Well, I'm not in the shelter anymore, but we are tucked away and we're not seen as much because of we're in shelter. People think of homelessness in New York City, think of street homelessness, majority, or people who live on the subways. I guess it's still considered a street, but it's in the subway. But yeah. So if you're a person who's listening or know somebody who's homeless, who's out there, you want to give people information, they can come to Homebase to get help, whether they're a family person or a regular person. And another thing I want to say, before the Rona, as we all know, we've been in this for a while now. Homebase, because it's funded, their money majority. I don't know if all of it comes from HRA or just some of it. I think all of it does. You could correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, and each obviously each organization that sponsors HRA or administer HRA, different nonprofits, I'm pretty sure receive other funding for different pilot programs, but it's an HRA created and funded program.
Thank you. If you know anything about HRA, most things take about, unless you get an emergency food stamp, that's the only thing will probably get you in a couple of days. Everything takes about 30 days or more. That's before Corona. Now things are taking even longer. For example, I gave him my food stamp stuff in about June, or I want to say May of this year. I just found out yesterday that I'm gonna be cut off, but I get the paperwork in months ago. So things are really backed up because they have less people working. And usually don't take that long for them to get the food stamp stuff together because their lack of staff, lack of certain things are taking longer. I know somebody else who had the doing their ERAP paperwork, it took them 8 months to get it. So one thing with these services, they're wonderful to have when you get them, but it's gonna take a long time to get them. It's not gonna be an overnight thing. I'm sorry to tell you that it's not gonna be an overnight fix. And with everything going on right now in society and in the world today, it's just not gonna be a fast track to anything. But when you get the help, you get the help. I can say they helped me with arrears before. I've got help with furniture. So the program does work. You just have to have patience, the time, and patience is really the thing. And stay on your worker's neck to really get the things. If you think everything else should be done, keep calling. It might be exhausting, but keep calling to get help. But yes, so I got that out the way, guys. So while you're a supervisor, what's like the kind of cases you saw mostly come in? I know everybody's coming about like housing problems and things like that, but what did you see and what population you think, in your opinion, was most affected by these things? And we know the stats in shelter, but probably for a home base, it might be different. It might be the same. I don't know. You're gonna tell me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Great question. Just from what you were mentioning before about adults that are also served by home base, this is a perfect example. An adult family can oftentimes have a 19-year-old and a 21-year-old, both in college, right, in housing crisis. So these two young adults are only a couple of years away, removed from childhood, from the teenage years. And these families are also in need of assistance. So these are also families that home-based assists, right? Many times I saw families having to make choices as far as deciding between their children continue going to college or getting into the workforce. So that's very important. Now, at home base, specifically in Brownsville, Brownsville has one of the highest number of public housing in the United States. So the population was mostly African American, many from the Caribbean, and I would say a small percentage of Latino families. Again, but they all have the same, issues. Number one, the lack of public infrastructure in Brownsville, issues at NYCHA, right? Lack of repairs, lack of assistance, delays with complaints, just the deplorable situation with certain apartments. Same with apartments, houses that were in bad condition, issues with landlords. I saw a number of things at Brownsville that it was really, for someone who came from Queens, and from a different background, it was really shocking. It was heartbreaking at times to see the struggles of families, of individuals, and families mostly led by women of color. It was just heartbreaking for me as a supervisor to tell a family that they did not qualify for service for rules that right now, as a policy associate, and working at CCC, we're trying to help remove. For instance, a family that wanted to relocate with a voucher because of a domestic violence. Multiple barriers prevent these families, right, from relocating. HRA oftentimes requests number of documents, appointment with domestic violence providers, and this only delays services, their relocation. Another issue that I found also at Brownsville at home base with families is I believe this is the most, especially during COVID, the most pressing need was rental arrears, the disruption of subsidies. And as you were mentioning before, everything in social services takes times. And just like social services providers, HRA is also short-staffed. So families will fall into rental arrears because the subsidy was the paperwork was not processed in time. And then families would fall into rental arrears. This, discord with landlords when the families, in fact, provided the documentation, but it's taking longer. So part of our work was to contact HRA, advocate with HRA, become the liaison, the connection between the city and the neighborhood. So this is, it was mostly rental arrears, aftercare for aftercare services with many families would move into NYCHA or into the community. They received, for families who had a cash assistance case, they will receive a small grant for furniture, but this was not enough. Oftentimes the grant was, let's say a family of 3 or 4, $1,200. You can probably get a bed or two and some kitchen appliances, but after that, I often saw families sleeping on floors, and that's what Homebase will come through and assist families with furniture assistance, beds, dressers, dining tables, to give families a start. That's what aftercare services are for. We had those services with aftercare. Oftentimes, during specific times, we had gift cards to help our families. And I hold great memories, for being able to assist families, and sometimes it was very hard. But one of the most fun memories that I had, I remember there was a hardworking mom with a child in junior high, another daughter graduated from high school, looking forward to going to college, and she just could not afford certain things. And fortunately, we had gift cards back then. This was about a year ago, and we provided her with a gift card, $100 gift card. And it was so important. Many people think that $100 is not much, but to change someone's day, right? With this, she was able to. She told me, Mr. Diaz, thank you. I was able to celebrate my daughter's graduation. We bought a cake, right? I bought her dress. We had some food. It was fun. Those are memories, and memories, especially for young people, are great. So that is one of the reasons that Homebase is in the community, and that's one of the memories that I took with me. And I know that many families benefit from these services, and definitely from funding, which I think is very important. There should be additional funding for services like this at Homebase, because it is a great help in the community. And now I feel fortunate to be on the other side of policy, where based on my experience at Homebase and seeing the positive things, and also was able to see the needs, both for funding and program implementation at Homebase. So yeah, these were the needs. And with adult families, I mostly saw issues with transfers. Many adults are transferred into the community to single rooms. And as oftentimes after a year or two, they wanted to move because issues in the apartment and conflict with other tenants.
People take so much little things for granted. Like you said, you gave the person $100 and they was able to get some other things and get a cake. Normal people who can afford it, they don't think of a cake as a big thing. But for a cake for a person's graduation or a birthday for a kid, that's memories they keep forever. And when they don't have this on celebration days, they think about it like, and they overcompensate most times when they're adults because they never had certain things as children. And you have people as adults trying to almost do over for a childhood they really can't do over for, So people might think like, oh, why give out gift cards? Well, they can't afford it. That's why they give out gift cards.
Absolutely. And this was a mother that was working full time. Right. Full time. People oftentimes even though it was an affordable housing or she had a subsidy, 30% of someone's income, if you take taxes off, right? Uh,
Right.
childcare, and the person makes minimum wage, it's so difficult. I don't know. I admire these families that make it through, and to see that her daughter is graduating high school, looking forward to going to college. I think it's deserving. As a society, we have to look at these things and improve, in this type of fundings. And I believe that gift cards are an excellent way to help emergencies, because with gift cards, all you have to do is just call, and um, oftentimes the gift cards are actually, already ready to use, but you don't have to fill out applications. You don't have to complete paperwork, right? It's an easy way to solve emergency problems.
Right. It's true. It's definitely, I think it will help out a lot more families, especially if they're low income. And you could tell, like, it's just people just need help. They're
Hmm.
not gonna be most time people are not down there forever, and they just need somebody to help them for now to get to the point that they need to get to be the best people they can be. You know.
And yeah, and also I forgot to mention, when they had their electricity was cut off, their gas was cut off. Oftentimes, these gift cards, $200-300 in gift cards, will solve it immediately, as opposed to these families going to HRA requesting a one-shot deal, or even us assisting. It will take us a few days to cut it. So gift cards, can definitely resolve emergencies like this.
That's definitely true. And we need not like we need water, we need light. Those are things
Yes.
that you need to just survive, comfortably at least in your home. Because you want to take a bath, you want to see where you're going, you want to make sure you can cook your food. These are things and necessities. So
Absolutely.
yeah, home base helps with those services and things like that. Did you see a lot of domestic violence cases? I don't think, to me, when I think of home base, I don't think of domestic violence help. But you
Hmm.
did talk about like transfers and stuff like that. So do you guys help with domestic violence cases like that?
Absolutely. And I don't have the statistics with me, but I did see an increase in domestic violence cases during the pandemic.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Um, and it's heartbreaking, because domestic violence, when we oftentimes think that, okay, we move the family away from the aggressor, we move the family away from the dangerous place, but we don't think that, for I'm going to give you an example that I saw often. Oftentimes the aggressor was also part of the subsidy, was also part of the case.
Oh,
And if it was a family of 3 or 4, let's say if it was a family of 3, if you remove this person from the case,
yeah,
then the voucher is no longer the same amount. It goes
that's
down.
true.
So now you see young mothers looking to move into a smaller apartment, right?
Right,
So it and these policies are set in stone. The voucher is this amount for 2, for 3 and 4 is a different amount. So I saw that. Other things I saw was, in order to be eligible for a transfer for domestic violence, you need a police report, right? Oftentimes, victims of domestic violence are afraid to go to the police,
right,
right, and press charges, right? So that was and I would tell them, I need a police report, they would not come back, right? They
right.
will not come back, and so I definitely think that there needs to be a different approach to assist families with domestic violence. Um, Perhaps expediting their assistance, their transfer, maintaining the same level of rental assistance, regardless if the household is reduced, right?
Right.
And yeah, and I did see many of these cases in also families escaping domestic violence from Latin America, right?
Wow.
Going into shelter. So it was, and then oftentimes when we think about families in shelter or in housing crisis, there's already a cycle, right? Many of these families experience this trauma as children, right?
That's true.
And there has to be more preventive services. Home base does provide financial counseling, referrals, but I think just COVID exacerbated, made it worse because many
Stuck in the
offices,
place.
many providers' offices were closed, um, working from home, and short-staffed. So it was very difficult, but I do admire the resiliency. They taught me a lot, and I only have one child, and when I saw these women just go through it and keep a good face, I was really inspired.
One thing when the pandemic started, I knew that domestic violence among spouses and among parents and children would definitely skyrocket, which it did. I was talking about it on my YouTube channel. I'm like, this is gonna make people go crazy because first of all, you say you love somebody, but when you ever stay too much around them, sometimes they get on your
Hmm.
nerves. So
Yes.
like my daughter, I say, go in your room, girl. I need space. Like I don't,
Hmm.
you don't get to the point where you have to like almost break a person's neck just to say, you people, everybody needs their own space.
Absolutely.
You don't get overwhelmed too much, but some people can't cope with those kind of things. They have went through things when they was younger, so they think it's okay to do that, or um, it's just to make them feel better. That's what they do. I don't know. So I don't know how they end up at that point, but that's what happens. And being stuck in a house when everybody else is like the world basically was shut down. Basically,
Hmm.
it was shut down, and for them to be stuck in a confined space, and most people in New York City, the apartments are small.
Hmm.
Not like we live like in Florida or Atlanta, where it's more people go outside freely. If you live in Brooklyn, where I live, there's buildings. People have 30 floors, and
Hmm.
apartments are small, and it has a lot of people in that one apartment just to be able to afford the rent.
Exactly.
So
And
can you imagine that being in a cramped space? It is like you surprised. I'm surprised it wasn't more violent. Like honestly,
yes, absolutely. And Kadisha, you just raised a great point about overcrowding and double occupancy. That's another issue that it's not often talked about. And this is an issue so severe at Brownsville and similar areas,
right?
uh, where oftentimes we were open cases for mothers with children who were staying at their sisters, at their cousins, at their grandmother's apartments in NYCHA, right?
Yeah,
And at NYCHA, the leaseholders are also at risk for tenancy,
I was gonna say that.
violations,
Yeah, right.
and these delays, with families trying to relocate and getting, for instance, whenever they went to PATH to get a referral for city feds, it was nerve wracking. I remember having clients, different stories, like so many stories of families trying to relocate. They were having issues with family members. And it has to be just heartbreaking to know that you're no longer welcome in an apartment, right?
That's true.
The, and children sense this. Children, do not have the space. And what happens to education? When children have to be in a call, in a Zoom call, or do homework, noise. These are different, really difficult situations. And what it's more concerning to me was that many of these families had their vouchers, what we call shopping letters with them, but they were having issues, income discrimination from landlords, loan applications, delays in applications, apartment inspections, and it's nerve wracking. It's nerve wracking because they they have a contact with a broker. They're ready to sign the lease, but yet all this red tape just delays and delays. And you keep telling the leaseholder, I'm moving at the end of the month. And something happens, it doesn't fall through. So this is something I saw a lot in Brownsville,
Right.
especially at NYCHA. And as we all know, that some of the infrastructure conditions at NYCHA, makes it a lot worse.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. It was a lot of things that you said with the education of the kids and being in double up spacing. It can be a lot for a child. Kids need space. My daughter, before I did foster care, was the only kid in the house. She even had my room at this point, just to herself. And can you imagine if I had other siblings in here with me who couldn't afford? I don't want to see them on the street. I don't want to see them homeless. So it's like I put them in because of my good heart, and I live in NYCHA. So
Hmm.
to have all a small space. My kid, if I had more siblings living in here, my mom, and the night to find out that I didn't put them on a lease, that's another problem. I
Hmm.
wanted to get my mother to come in here, but she's somewhere else right now in Queens. But eventually she got to move in with me because she's older. But the night shift person told me, oh, she can't move, and I'm like, what if she's sick and had nobody to help her? Where she's
Hmm.
now? If she's sick and she's an old person and she's blood, I can give my birth certificate to show you that we're related. Why
Hmm.
is there a problem that she come and live with me? She's my mom. Not like I'm talking about a boyfriend or friends to put in my house. I'm putting a
Hmm.
person who's a relative to me, who birthed me in my house. They're very sticky. With Section 8 is the same thing. So if you are on in these things, you know, NYCHA Section 8, be careful. Even FEPS, CFEPS, be careful who's in your home with you, who if they're not on the lease or not. Because if they do, because NYCHA try to do the inspections, they try to come in your apartment because they claim they have the right to, whatever like that, and they want to see who's living here so they can make sure they, I guess, charging you right or make sure who's on the lease is on the lease. It's very kind of scary that like any minute, even though you're trying to help out your own family, you can go back homeless again because you try to help out somebody else. And it's like it's not like I'm just bringing all these people. Most times the people who are doing this are family members that are doing this. So it's not just like random people or coworkers or something like that. It's family. And I feel like if it's a family relation, it shouldn't be a problem. But the city and the state doesn't see it like that. So who am I to say that it shouldn't be happening? But I think it's outrageous how they treat people. Because if I owned my own house, it wouldn't matter who's in and out. But I guess because they're paying half of my rent, I have to go under so much strenuous rules. It's like the shelter. When you
Hmm.
go in there, you have a curfew. Certain shelters you can't bring pots and pans in. Because I know I used to be at the Canberra in the Landon in Queens by LaGuardia. I was allowed to use pots and pans in there because they didn't have stoves, and you weren't allowed to bring in a hot pot. Now, a hot plate. Now they have stoves and stuff since I guess Corona, because people I guess it was easier to do cooking your room or whatever, so they made it suitable for them now. Before you weren't allowed to do anything in your room like that, and you
Hmm.
have to go through metal detectors so they can see what's in your bags to make sure you didn't bring those things up. So it's just like the system. If you want to get anything free, if you need help with anything, you have to pull teeth. It's ridiculous. So the
Yeah,
whole system just needs a lot of help.
absolutely.
Yeah.
A, a lot of help, a lot of, and these are just policies and just some rules that need to be like softened a little bit because
Right.
um, you were mentioning with your mom to move. I often saw cases where an elderly person, right, residing at NYCHA for years, needed assistance, help, and a child, one of their childs moved into the apartment to help them, to assist them, to be with them, right? And
Right.
they also needed a housing, so they moved in. Unfortunately, after this, adults passed away or were moved into nursing home,
Right.
then these families were, at risk, oftentimes evicted from NYCHA.
Yeah.
Um, it's such a rigid um, structure that even if families would get legal assistance, the residency laws at NYCHA are very strict.
Yeah.
And even if families have proved that they've been there for years, they were paying rent on time, um, still families will get evicted
It's
because
usually if you're not on the lease too. So I feel like if it's like how I would bring my mother in, it's harder. But if it's like me and I want to bring my kids in if I get older, I think it'll be easier. That's what it seems like. I'm not sure if that's true or not. But I feel like if it's your kids who you actually had, and long you put them on the lease and they have the accredited for them and have birth certificates and everything, I think it's better. It's easier to not have a problem. Like God forbid I die and I'm God forbid I'm still here in the next 20 years. I would never want to be here that long. People, they stay in Nigeria, they love it. I don't know. It's just not for me. And my daughter's here. As long as she's on the lease, she should be fine. Long they had her on the lease the whole time, and she was, when she gets over 18, she put that she's working and doing all this. She should be fine if we stay in here that long,
Mm-hmm.
But I think a person who's coming in and is like, unless your person's getting married to you, that's I feel like it's another easier way to get them in your apartment. If you get married to that person, I'm not saying go marry everybody, guys, but I'm just saying these are, I think, the easier ways than if it's like your parent, which I think if it's your parent, it shouldn't be a big deal, but in their eyes, it's a big ordeal. But it's just the whole system is just. I think what it is, the policies work for one thing, and when the way they word it, go against something else. So it's like they have to fine tune a lot of things to get it to work the way it needs to work. And that's
Yes.
the weird thing about it.
Yes, but I'm very hopeful because if we have to look at also, the potential changes that can be done after COVID, because COVID left us, number one, we have the ability to communicate, remotely, and two, it has exposed many of these issues, right? And like this great, research that we have with your podcast, it allows to bring these voices, bring these experiences, right? Expand policy, and it has created a window of opportunity to bring some change, and change comes incrementally, right? And if I think that's the best way to go about it, just incrementally. Like right now, there's a big push to remove the 90-day stay in shelters. Different organizations are pushing for that, so that's also a good call. It will reduce the time of family spending in shelter. So those are little wins, and keep on moving, bringing these issues to the forefront, and one thing at a time, creating change and creating voices, coalitions, right? Because I would think that multiple voices bring different changes and ideas, and just keep up the great work.
If you don't know what he's talking about, so when you go into shelter, I want to think it's all shelters. I don't think it's only family shelters. I think it's all shelters. Whether you're in family, I want to say in youth, but I'm not sure. I'm not 100%. But I believe in singles, like men and women shelters, this happens. That when you get into the shelter, I can only say for PATH for sure. You might know the other systems better than I do. But when you go into the shelter, first you have to go through a preliminary thing, like you in there for 10 days, and they say whether you're accepted or not. It's 10 to 14. It depends on what they do. And they tell you if you're accepted or not. And they say you're accepted, great. You wait 90 days from that day to be able to qualify for a voucher. They don't get nothing. They don't do nothing on the books for you. They might help you out with a NYCHA application. That's about it. But like getting FEPS, the city FEPS, you won't be able to start the whole everything until those days are passed. But if you're denied, say if you're denied 3 or 4 times, and then you approve on the 4th or 5th time, even though you was in shelter the whole time, they don't count the 90 days until you were approved into shelter, which is ridiculous. Because you was there the whole time. Because after example, 3 or 4 times, that's 10, 20, 30. That's already a month in shelter. That means you could have been a month into your 90 days. And most times people are usually denied off a technicality. And then it could be, you didn't have one thing for 1 month because you need 2 years of saying that you were living at a certain address. It could be one thing like that. And a person who doesn't know the system that well doesn't know that, but keep on getting denied. People at PATH is not explaining it to you properly. So you end up going back and back again, trying to do a fair hearing, doing this and that to get yourself in the system. By the time the 30 days are passed, you already lost so much time already, and you're in the shelter, getting more depressed because you're in the shelter in the first place. So that's the 90-day rule he's talking about. I want to be, when we're talking about certain things, if people don't know anything about the system, you might come across the the podcast like, what is this 90-day rule? But a lot of organizations now are pushing to get that out. It's like it's a waste, because most times people get approved for it eventually, but nobody is working on their case because they wasn't approved. But people can get out of shelter faster even if they're not approved yet, but they're probably going to be approved. Just count those days they're in there initially, get everything started so you can, get everything, the vouchers out to them much faster so families can get out into, their homes much faster. So that's what he's talking about, the 90-day rule. So
Yeah. Thank you, Khadija, for explaining what the 90-day rule, and it only adds to the family's struggles. What happens with children when they have to enroll in college while in school while in shelter. School year just started. Families were not able to move during the summer. What if they find an apartment and they move somewhere in November? Doesn't mean the children have to change, schools.
right.
It's different. And same thing happens in the community, right? When families are looking to move because of lack of space, security, violence, domestic violence, issues with the apartment. And oftentimes I've noticed too that they will wait another year because the children started school. And maybe next year they're not eligible anymore. So it creates this cycle, right?
It does.
It's like a bubble that this happens, you come back, this happens, you come back. So there's got to be some mechanisms, some plans, and like I mentioned, incrementally to help people break this cycle.
It's so true. So, well, he said it way back in the beginning of the podcast, but if you remember, kind of go back in your mind. But I think everybody should know this. The people who are in shelter the most are African Americans, and people who are Hispanic is the next highest, and then other is like the third, which other is really a small amount of people who are in the shelter. But as you know, I consider myself Afro-Caribbean, but I'm born here in America. But Juan represents the Latin. Is it Latinx? What's the proper? Because people have different words for it.
Yes, I'm fine with Latin. Yeah.
Latin. So background. So what in that community can you speak to what's happening from what you have seen working at home base and also seeing what might be happening in the shelter world right now? Or
okay. Yes, thank you for bringing this topic. Well, I'm personally a formerly undocumented immigrant, so I fully understand the struggles of many families, mixed status families, like parents who are undocumented and children are born in the United States. Number one, the language barriers, both our shelter and in the community. In the community, I noticed that there's lack of translation services at NYCHA. There's a lack of Spanish-speaking assistance at HRA centers. A lot of confusion. Many families talked about discrimination for both the language and their immigration status. So there's definitely I would say additional layers of barriers that these families faced. And as we all know, this has a big effect on their children's education, mental health, and just emotional instability. I do applaud the fact that the families are eligible for FAPS, even though the parent might be undocumented, as long as they have a cash assistance case. Their children, because of the children, they're eligible for FAPS. Same goes with the city FAPS. But there are, immigration policy is a different topic, but now with the influx of families entering shelter from the southern border, it just adds, it adds the need, the stress, the need to have more supports, more Spanish-speaking coordinators, social workers, shelter personnel, home-based personnel, HRA personnel, because ultimately, if we put immigration one side. Let's say their parents are undocumented. Children that are born in the United States are American citizens,
Right.
and they do deserve opportunities like everyone else, right? Just
Right.
give them that first step, that opportunity, a fair chance, right? After that, every individual will, do what's best for them, but give out these children opportunities. I was happy to help many of these families, but I do see a big need and a lack of at least in this medium, people are able to communicate, but I do see that they don't have a voice. I'm happy with some of um, the work that the city is doing through the Commissioner of Immigrant Affairs. They do see some effort, but a lot more needs to be done.
So I just want to be corrected. When they have the cash assistance, it's through the kids, which I know that.
Mhm.
But be clear that because the parents are not counted, because if you don't know,
Mhm.
cash assistance, they count each person. And I think also, I'm not sure about the age, but I know they count each person on the thing, where the parent is not included, but the kids are. Say if it's three people in the household and the kids are, is a mom and two kids. They're only counting the kids, they're not counting the mom. So when they do the FEPS or the city FEPS, it's not going to be counted as it's three people in the household. It's only going to be counted as two people because only two people are citizens. Am I correct?
Correct. And there's even cases, I saw many cases, where one child has a social security number, an older child does not have one, and then the mother. So you have three, oftentimes four members in a household, and only one had a social security number, which means that that cash case only receives cash assistance for one person,
Yeah.
shelter allowance for one person, which is 215 if I'm not mistaken, and if it's FEPS, maximum rent for one person. So it tells you the barriers that these families encounter. Same goes with NYCHA,
Right.
right? Mixed status families are eligible for NYCHA. However, they have to pay a larger portion of rent.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Oh, you didn't know that? Yes. So
I know that.
I remember a couple of cases where the head of household was undocumented, and she had a child, and her portion was almost $900.
What?
Yes, even though she couldn't report any income because she was undocumented. She worked off the books. She paid almost $900. It's a Section 8 federal law um, that basically it in my opinion it's a policy that deters family from accessing this type of subsidies because their their share of the rent is it's much higher than 30%.
That's crazy. I did not know they were doing that. That's outrageous. They do the same thing with colleges though. If you're undocumented, they make you pay more in tuition because of it. And the
Mm-hmm.
tuition amount is crazy high. And the crazy thing to me is like, if you really think about the history, not trying to get, all in there, but America is built on immigrants. Like literally,
Mm-hmm.
America is built on immigrants. I feel like they should get a more break than anything else. But I feel like honestly, we shouldn't have anything about borders, and I think that's not even should be a thing. I should think we should be able to roam free, go where we want to go, be happy where we want to be. But it's not how the world we work in. But I feel like it shouldn't be. It's not like people are coming into the country
Mm-hmm.
and making it horrible. They're literally building you up because you don't know how to do it yourself. Like I don't understand what the problem is, but
Yeah, and just to give you a number that is shocking, more than half of those small business owners in the city are immigrants.
right.
And if you go into any community, the laundromat,
Grocery stores.
grocery stores
Mhm.
are owned by immigrants, right?
Right.
And immigrants spend, right, brings taxes to the city, to the state.
Exactly.
The city of New York, provides a lot of taxes for the state. And these are immigrant families, immigrant workforce. They bring diversity, different cultures, language. Uh, when I was in Brownsville, I got to know so many new cultures. Run really nice cultures, families, food, you name it. But there's a large disinvestment in these immigrant communities, right?
It doesn't make sense to me because, even because even if you don't have paperwork, you're undocumented, but you have is a number. TIN is, I think, Jamaica, for Jamaica. Is another. It's not a social security number, but it's another number you can have. You can pay taxes. Some people who are undocumented are paying taxes, and people don't even think about that. They're paying taxes and they can't even get the stuff that we get. Like sometimes the stuff that people who are citizens or residents can get,
Mm-hmm.
which is crazy to me. I'm sorry, if I was undocumented and I could get some of the stuff, I'm not paying nobody's taxes. I'm sorry, it's not happening. I wouldn't be
Yes,
doing it.
yes, exactly. It's called is it IT number?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, it's the number I'm talking about.
yes.
Yeah,
And I remember when I was undocumented, I remember, reporting taxes, right? And I knew that I would not get any benefit at all, but many immigrants do pay taxes. They don't qualify for child tax credit, right? They don't many. Oh, thank you for bringing this to the conversation. What I also noticed in the Brownsville community during COVID is that many parents who were undocumented did not qualify for unemployment benefits, even though they were reporting taxes, right?
right,
They did not qualify for unemployment, so benefits. And again, who feels the brunt of these policies? American-born children,
right.
right? It's tough. It's tough. There's definitely need to be some changes in not just housing, because housing is the big part, right?
Right.
Within housing, there's all these overlapping, like labor, employment, childcare, food access, youth development. There's all these overlapping factors, right? Housing is the big one, but we need to reinforce all these factors so that family have this stability. And I think unemployment benefits is one of them. At least, at the city and state level, right?
Right.
Federal levels, it's another. It's a much complicated, but at least at the federal level, extend benefits to mixed status families. Extend. I welcome the allocation of, I believe it's about $10 million in this year's budget for childcare assistance for undocumented families, right?
Yes.
So important, so parents can go to work and provide.
And
For
they're
sure.
usually the people who are working the hardest and getting paid the least because they don't even get paid minimum wage usually. They get paid
Mhm.
for that because they know people. They threaten, first of all, to call ICE on some people, which is crazy as it is. But they also know that nobody's going to care, or they're not even going to report them to no
Mhm.
bureau or nowhere because they don't have paperwork. So they take advantage of them and they
Yeah,
work the
and
hardest and they give the most hours but pay them the least. And that's the crazy thing about it also.
yeah, and no, not only that, many immigrants don't even get paid the minimum wage.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, they work,
Much
they
lower.
will get paid weekly, and if you break down the hours, you're like, hold on, you're making $8 an hour,
Right. Like
but
in the 90s or something.
yeah, yeah, but they find, talking from an immigrant perspective, those those issues actually create resiliency, and that's why New York is great, because it was built on immigrants. It's an immigrant city, and immigrants find ways to make it happen.
That's my problem with New York, though. Like you say, it's great. Like New Jersey, New York is the states would say. First of all, New York say we're a shelter state. So if they say if you need shelter, come in it. But they give you so much ties up to even get into shelter, yes or no, kind of thing. If you're gonna say we're open, just be open. Then we're gonna say if you're a person who's undocumented, you're welcome here. But yet when you get here, you can't get a lot of things. So it's like if you're gonna say your arms are open, but yet your arms still chained and you can't help, what's going on. You need to make a little thing. If you're going to be an open state, I know federal stuff is not going to work, but by the city level, you need to make enough money for people who are coming in to be able to help them. Because, you know, at the end of the day, as you said before, most businesses, like small businesses, are owned by people who are immigrants. Obviously, they're not staying down. They're going to work until they get to the way they need to be to help out the community they're living in. So it's like, if you pour more into these people, they could be able to help your community much better. So, I don't know.
Absolutely, absolutely. But like I mentioned earlier, it's now a good opportunity for advocates like you, like many organizations that are at the forefront to bring these issues to the forefront, bring ideas, right? And bring resources and like this one podcast, Zoom calls, rallies, to bring some change, incremental, but some change.
Yes. We also have City Hall Day. City Hall? I think that's not what it's called, but it's something hall. I'll probably get the information down below for you guys. But it's a day that you can go to your representative for your state. I believe it'll be down below, but you can go there and voice your opinions about certain things that's happening in where you live. So that's going to be coming up September, I want to say 13th or 14th. Again, the information will be down below. And if you have anything that you feel like you should be speaking about, you do have to pre-register for this event. To go is on Zoom, is not in person. And you'll be able to do that with your representative. Do you have any last word for the people on the podcast?
Yes, to families who are impacted, for families or individuals who want to see change, express your voices, sign up to rallies, going to be informed. It's very important. Also, to if you have a housing need or an emergency, reach out to Homebase. There is assistance, and as Khadijah mentioned, you have to be patient. Always have documentation ready, available. It is huge. Always make sure that you have your Social Security card, ID, birth certificates. A lease is hugely important for rental arrears assistance, for any transfer, any type of that you need a lease, a current lease, pay stubs. Have always these handy, put them in a folder, because if you run into a housing crisis, these are documentations that you're going to need. And just keep doing the great work.
Thank you. And make sure your name is on it. Because if your name is not on it, like if it was your mom's lease and you were there, that might not be a good look for you either. So, you know, try to get your name on the lease if you can, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and thank you so much for your invitation. I am really impressed by the work that you and other fellows are doing, and always happy to be part of this.
Thank you. So, guys, we have come to the end of the Hear Our Voices podcast. I hope you reached this far into the podcast. We have so many events coming up for you. We have another panel coming in October. So, guys, listen out for those information. We'll be having the form in our description probably in September, when you probably hear this, to be honest. Because right now we're at the end of August, if you don't know. So, go to follow us on all our platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are on there constantly updating you with different information. And if you are a person who wants to get interviewed on the podcast, if you're a person with lived experience, who was in a family, it could be couch surfing, it could be in a shelter in New York City base, we would love to have you on the podcast. If you're a person who worked in the system and who's here to change the system, or if you know about any resources, just DM us or email us and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Honestly, most times the same day, because we're always on always on our phones or on the internet looking at our information. We have about 5 people on staff doing it. So we're pretty, we're not that big yet, so we can really keep up with the emails and things like that. So guys, thank you for listening. See you later. Bye.